Hi, thanks for joining us for another week of our Latino Political News Roundup. I'm Sara Ines Calderon.
And I'm Adriana Maestas.
And this week is the big week. This is like the Super Bowl of politics. So I don't know, like where are we at? What's going on?
Well, Hurricane Sandy threw things, threw the election for a loop a little bit, but not really. I mean, it didn't really take things off track, but some people are calling this the October surprise. So Hurricane Sandy, which happened earlier in the week, put the focus back on climate change in the presidential election. And it also gave President Obama an opportunity to act presidential.
Yeah.
And in doing so, he even earned the praise of New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, which was also kind of interesting. Apparently, President Obama had been in constant communications with all of the governors that were affected by Hurricane Sandy, Chris Christie being one of them in New Jersey. And he
gave Obama offered some huge props.
Yeah, well, Chris Christie
on
gave
Fox News.
Chris Christie gave President Obama huge props on Fox News, but he also, in doing that, it just sort of shows that there was a moment because of the natural disaster where politics were put aside, and so that was really interesting. Along with that, too, unemployment numbers came out this week, and these are kind of related because Sandy could be used as an excuse to spur more construction and rebuilding, so that might stimulate the economy up in the Northeast and along the Eastern Seaboard. But unemployment nationally jumped up slightly to 7.9 from 7.8% overall. That was the numbers for September, where 7.8. And Latino unemployment also inched up slightly by 0.1% as well, from 9.9% to 10%. And overall, in October, 171,000 jobs were added to the economy, which did exceed expectations a little bit, but it's still not on course to where we need to be.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So that's where we are with the state of the election. Sandy, big deal.
Yeah.
And the economy.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and some of the other interesting things that happened this week, there wasn't really obviously a lot more going on because everybody was focused on Sandy. But I know that at least one, another person from, I guess, like the opposite side of the aisle as President Obama was Michael Bloomberg, who also endorsed the president because of climate change, which you were talking about.
Yeah, climate change.
That was really interesting. When it comes to a couple of other races around the country, I did a story about Ted Cruz, who is basically going to be the next senator from Texas. He's going to fill Kay Bailey Hutchison's seat. He's a Republican. He's a Tea Party Republican. And, he's going to be the first Latino senator from Texas, which is very irksome to, because he's Cuban, and he's also, like I said, he's a Cuban Tea Partier who's actually originally from Canada, although I think he grew up in Houston. But it's very irksome to the Mexican-American community, especially political community in Texas, that has been like traditionally excluded from political infrastructure, to kind of have this other person come in and take over, which unfortunately, it seems like Ted Cruz plays the Latino card when it's convenient to him, right? I mean, when he was at the RNC giving a speech, he was talking about his immigrant roots, but when he was campaigning to get this nomination to a largely white Republican electorate in Texas, he was talking to them about the Tea Party. So he's not really like a Latino candidate unless it's, the crowd he's speaking to. And he doesn't really have any Latino support in Texas.
He doesn't speak Spanish.
Oh, he doesn't speak Spanish.
Yeah.
So it's actually, it's kind of sad. And I mean, I think Cruz is, it's kind of sad to people in Texas who are involved in that, political movement, because essentially it's not even because he's Latino that he got the seat. It's because he represents the Tea Party movement that's against like the Rick Perry's, the David Dewhursts of the world.
The more establishment
Republicans in Texas. And, Ted Cruz is like the flip side, the Tea Party candidate. So then we had an interesting interview with Richard Carmona this week, who basically tried to come out as like the Latino Barry Goldwater for Arizona, which is really interesting. He was basically saying that, I asked him, so is the fact that you're a Democrat and you're ahead in fundraising
Mhm.
and the polls to your, Republican opponent, does that mean that Arizona is becoming a blue state? Does that mean that the electorate in Arizona is becoming, less conservative? And he basically said, no, it just means we're becoming more moderate. So I think that's really interesting to think about.
It is interesting.
Is the effect of SB 1070 to moderate the electorate in Arizona? Because there have been a lot of repercussions out of all of these types of, laws.
It's also interesting that he brought up Barry Goldwater because, I mean, Barry Goldwater has been dead since the 1990s, and Barry Goldwater, a lot of people look at him as a political figure from the 1960s. So, I mean, the Goldwater legacy, in the sense like of what he stood for in the Republican Party, is largely gone because Barry Goldwater was a little bit more kind of like a civil libertarian in the sense that he wasn't into the Christian right. He was pro gay rights. He was a little more moderate about a lot of things. I want to say even including the drug war. So I mean, it's sort of like that legacy of the Republican Party is kind of not alive anymore. But Carmona brought it up.
Yeah. So it was a pretty interesting piece, I thought, so you might want to check it out. Of course, like all of these other stories, it's going to be in the description box if you want to read any of these stories or follow up. So finally, one of the races that I wanted to highlight was Dr. Raul Ruiz against Republican. She's not incumbent in this district, but she's been in Congress since the 90s, I believe. I forget exactly how long. Mary Bono Mack. Mary Bono Mack. So he's ahead in, he says, according to his internal campaign poll, he's ahead 48 to 42 against Bono Mack, and he's also ahead in fundraising. He raised $140,000 compared to her $90,000 in the first part of October. So that'll be really interesting if we have a Latino from that part of California into Congress. So we'll see what happens.
Definitely, that would be a big change. Another thing that kind of was big news this last week was Latino voter enthusiasm is on the rise. And right now, and this was according to a Latino Decisions tracking poll from last Monday, 87% of Latino voters who were polled are almost certain to cast a ballot. And at the same time, and this was just as of last week, so I'm sure more people have already voted, they were saying about 8% of Latinos had already cast a ballot in early voting. So, and with that, Obama leads over Romney 73 to 21%, quite a substantial lead. Yeah, definitely, very significant. This was sort of interesting too, and you shared this data with me. There was also some data that came out from the AP showing that Latinos have donated little to presidential campaigns in this past election cycle. What is important to note is, so we have a lot of enthusiasm for voting in the community, but we're just really not there in terms of giving our dollars to candidates. And the analysis did not consider the sources of contributions less than $200, which is something that Sara and I both thought was faulty with the analysis, because our community is one of the poorer ones, and we've been more affected by the recession and the economic woes. So it's kind of unlikely that there would be very many of us donating more than $200 to candidates.
I mean, that's a lot of money even for like a middle class family, right?
Definitely.
I mean, that's not nothing.
It could be like a week's worth of groceries.
Yeah.
At
least, yeah. If you have a family.
Definitely. So, there was that, and that's sort of some interesting data to take a look at. I suggest you look at that. And again, it goes back to what you said. We have had higher than average unemployment. And we have also been affected by the foreclosure crisis and the loss of wealth coming from real estate.
Exactly. So that was pretty interesting. And then another thing that I thought was actually cool, which I thought put kind of like a more positive spotlight on Latino voters in this election, is the California instituted online voter registration for the first time this election cycle. And the results were pretty freaking awesome. I mean, they, I think, registered 679,000 people total in the state, and about half of those came from online. And those online voters tended to be younger, just like Latino voters. And I personally registered a young Latino voter online, and he voted for the first time in this election. So that was really cool, I thought.
I think the online voter registration capability is really
cool.
going to be helpful to the Latino community because, you know, there are people who just gas right now is pretty expensive.
Yes, yeah.
And so you think about, okay, am I going to go drive to the post office or the DMV or wherever, you know, the registrar, your county registrar of
People
voters.
are thinking about that right now in California.
Exactly. So it's like, well, if I can do this from home and then I get online verification that says it's gone through, then, you know, great.
It's pretty awesome.
Yeah,
so it's pretty awesome.
Another story that we have, and actually this was up on Politics 365, like some of the other ones we've been mentioning, is that it's about competing California tax propositions and how these two propositions have been vying for the Latino vote. And this is an article by Megan Ortiz, and this is on Politics 365. And basically this has to do with a little bit of a breakdown between Proposition 30, which is backed by Governor Brown and the Democratic establishment, and Proposition 38, which is backed by a woman named Molly Munger.
Who has a gajillion dollars.
Yeah, who is a wealthy lady, but she has a record in civil rights. So what that basically does, that article talks about the different tactics in terms of reaching Latino voters. And I suggest you check it out. It's sort of interesting that the Mexican American Legal Defense and Education Fund, MALDEF, came out in favor of both Proposition 30 and 38, which is a little confusing because if both of the propositions do pass, then it comes down to which proposition received the most votes will be the one that is ultimately implemented.
Wow. I didn't know that.
So, and it is a little interesting. Proposition 30 basically it has a sales tax. It has a small sales tax, and then it also raises income taxes on those that earn over $250,000 per year. Whereas Prop 38 has a sliding income tax that would affect people who even make as little as about a little bit over $7,000 is where that begins.
Wow.
Yeah, so I mean it's interesting. You know, so check out that analysis right now. I think Proposition 38 is pulling behind, and Proposition 30 is also to under 50%. So it'll be it's going to be something to watch on Tuesday to see if they're able to pull this off, because part of what the narrative has been is that if Prop 30 or one of these doesn't pass, there's going to be a big round of cuts to the public schools that are really hanging on by a thread.
Barely. Right now.
In California.
So.
Yeah.
That's intense.
It is.
I didn't know that.
Well, and it's also, it gets down to like the will of the people to raise taxes on themselves, because you know, people will always say... That's
kind of what got us into this mess in the first place.
Yeah,
right?
You know, that they want services and they want their schools to be good and you know, but if you don't fund them, you know...
We don't have magic, apparently.
Yeah.
In politics.
Yeah, exactly. And then we have like one other article that we suggest everybody reads. It's basically a really good summary of 5 congressional races to watch that are key to Latinos. In the sense of, you know, there are Latino candidates who are running and they're in tight races, or they are in races that were really affected by redistricting. And this was an article by Megan Ortiz, and it's on Politics 365. Sara and I have kind of talked about some of these races before in other video roundups, but this presents the information again, just sort of in a nice little concise way.
Definitely. So. Well, thanks so much for bearing with us another one of our video roundups, news roundups, and next week we'll definitely have some juicy stuff to talk about.
Oh, definitely.
We'll be breaking it all down, so definitely stay tuned, subscribe to our channel, like this video, share it to Facebook, and email it around, share it with your friends, and send us tips. We're both on Twitter. I'm Sada Chica D.
And I'm Latino Politics.
And we'll see you here next week. Bye.
Bye.